Hey, welcome to On the Path podcast with Cheryl Nembhard. Since I was a kid, I was told my conversations were way too deep. Well, now it's paying off. Join me and the names you know as we go deep into their personal stories of triumph, tragedy, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Friends, this crazy, overwhelming life we live calls for some serious encouragement and inspiration. So grab a cup of coffee and get your notebook because we're going into the classroom of life. So let's get lifted with faith-filled conversations. I'll see you on the path.
Watch in Canada on Yes TV and the Yes TV app, or watch on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, Pioneer Network, Faith TV, and more in the US. Also watch and subscribe on our YouTube channel.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of On the Path. I am so excited to have you with me. As I always say, with us, we are in the classroom of life. We are learning from incredible teachers, incredible storytellers who are not just celebrating all the mountaintop, shiny, glitzy stuff, but they're sharing vulnerably, transparently from the rock bottom moments of their life. And the lessons we are learning are making us better with God as our guide. And I cannot wait for you to meet this next guest. I just love his heart already. I'm so excited to have this guest. Let me tell you a little bit about Jack Mooring. So Jack Mooring is a pastor, speaker, songwriter, and author. He started his ministry early with his family and co-founded the Grammy-nominated band, just a little band, nothing major, called Leeland, which received 4 nominations for Best Contemporary Christian Music Album. And after a decade of touring, Jack transitioned into full-time pastoring, eventually founding Celebration of Life Church in Nashville. He also continues to songwrite with Integrity Music, and he's dedicated to sharing the gospel. I love this, in a post-Christian culture. And he lives with Franklin, Tennessee. And we're going to be talking about his brand new book, Portrait of God, Rediscovering the Attributes of God Through the Stories of His People. Will you give a big Canadian welcome to the one and only Jack Mooring?
Yay! Cheryl, what an honor to be on with you. This is amazing.
I'm just so excited to have you here, Jack. Welcome, welcome. We are so excited. We love you here. We've all been tracking with Leeland, and I cannot wait to talk a little bit about that. But first things first, let's get a little bit of a fun introduction happening to maybe people are hearing you for the first time or getting to know you for the first time. So, Jack, if your life was a movie, what would the title be? And why?
Oh man. Yeah. Oh, that is amazing. Maybe. Oh, that is like such a good question. So like a title of an existing movie, or I can create my own title.
No, you create.
Oh
your
my gosh.
own.
See, you just, I'm a songwriter. So now my brain's buzzing, it would probably be, from the studio to the library, maybe, because I'm a musician, but I'm a bookish person, and that's, I kind of carry both of those as well, like the musical side, but also just words and books in general. I'm passionate about that, kind of merging both. Also too, it would probably be, some type of movie about a kid in revival meetings his entire life. That would probably be one of the most appropriate, because that's basically how we grew up. Me and my brother Leeland, we were in traveling the country all the time in America with our family, ministering at churches. But between revival meetings, music studios, and libraries, that probably encapsulates my life.
I love it. And it came to me, I'll loan it to you, from revivals to revived.
Come on, there we go. That's it. Done. I'm calling the studios right now. I'm getting in touch with LA. It's done.
It's a wrap. It's a wrap. Well, speaking of great titles, I love the title of this book, your upcoming book, Portrait of God, Rediscovering the Attributes of God Through the Stories of His People. Why did you name it that?
Wow. Yeah. So I started writing the book when I was living here in Texas several years ago. And I felt this sense of a lot of my friends were in this, a bit of an identity crisis, myself included in moments, just going we grew up in the church. I could see some of my friends sort of like going off the deep end a little bit. Even some of them, trying to leave the faith, And so I'm like, we got to go back to basics. And so I feel like anytime we're unsure of who we are, it's because we're unsure of who God is. Like when we have wrong ideas about him, we get all these bad ideas about our life, about who we are. And I think that's one of the reasons our culture is so confused right now, is because we've left the basics. And I think we need to go back to the face of God and re-image him, like get an accurate picture of who he is and what he's like. So yeah, I just had this idea of this painting God. You know what I mean? That was the initial idea of painting God, and then we morphed it over to portrait of God. And so I feel like all of us need to get a clearer and crisper image of who God is in this time. So yeah, that's what the title came. And then I told stories of people in church history because I wanted people who actually encountered this God. I wanted to tell their stories. So that's where the stories of his people came in.
Love that. I love that. And so what's your hope? Like what's the big dream that you hope that readers will get from the book?
I hope when they read this book, when they put it down, that they will know that they can know God. And I'm so grateful for my childhood. I'm so grateful for my parents. They're great parents. But I think the number one thing they did is they taught me and my brother and my sister, they put this belief in us and through the word of God that we can know God for ourselves. We can have a face-to-face relationship with him. And I think a lot of people, it's like they're a little unsure of that. And that's why I told the stories that I told in this book of just men and women of God who actually encountered him. They were normal people like Jack and Cheryl. You know what I mean? Now Cheryl's way more awesome than Jack is, but it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like normal people who encountered this amazing God. And so all of us can do it.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love that. And you say in your book that the Christian life is more about remembering than learning. Wow. Could you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, I like books. I like to learn. I'm all about learning, right? But what I found so far in my life that it's really not. It's not about learning more things. It's about remembering the things I do know. It's about going back to the first things. And I find my worst moments in life is when I've been forgetful. It's not because I'm not learning enough new stuff. It's because I'm forgetting the old ways, the old things that I know, the fundamentals. It's like athletes. Anytime an athlete starts having problems, you'll ask professional athletes. They don't go try and learn some new technique. They always go back to fundamentals. And I feel like that's what this book is about. It's trying to bring us back to the basics of who God is, what is he like, and that's what the Christian life is. It's a continual rhythm of remembering, of like, that's why we go to church. That's why we have relationships, is because God is continually trying to remind us how much he loves us and who he is.
But when we there's that beautiful sort of tension of a great, beautiful service, worship service, building wonderful, thriving, flourishing community, but then you step outside into what some people would say is the real world.
Yep.
And there's so much going on, Jack, that makes us question and doubt, and we're discouraged. I want to know, you talked about knowing God and knowing his nature and who he is. What do you know about God from just looking at the craziness of what's going on, and how does your book reinforce God's nature as well?
Right. I start off in the book by the chapter is about God's love. The first chapter is, because that's everything flows from there. I mean, it actually animates God's nature. Every attribute of God is based in his love, his justice, his holiness. Everything flows from his love. And so we have to get that. If we don't get that, we ain't got nothing. As we say down in Texas, ain't got nothing. So
I love it.
So it all starts with his love, but I also talk about his sovereignty and his holiness. And I think we need to hold both of those things together, especially in the world that we're in. It will put us at rest if we know that God, first of all, he loves us. Done. Like he proved it on the cross. What more does he need to prove to us? He literally gave his life for us. He loves us unimaginably. And he's unbelievably powerful. He is sovereign. So I think if we hold both of those things, why would we worry? Why would we fret? Because he has a sovereign plan. He knows what he's doing. He is more powerful than any parliament, any Congress. as good as those things can be, but he's more powerful than them. And he loves us. If it was only his power, it'd be a little scary, Cheryl. But it's a power based in a perfect love. So we can take a deep breath and rest because he loves us and he knows what he's doing.
He loves us and he knows what he's doing. That it's so beautiful to hear and comforting, but I think in real time sometimes we struggle pulling that down.
Yes.
What's your encouragement for someone who is in an unsteady relationship? How do they maintain some sort of like steady, grounded relationship in God?
Right. Right. Well, some of the stories I tell in this book of people in church history, they went through an incredible amount of pain, trauma. I share the story of Fanny Crosby, who she was, as a child, they sort of messed up an operation on her eyes, and she became totally blind as a baby. She goes on to write thousands of hymns that glorify God. All these people, C.S. Lewis, I could go on and on about their stories, right? They experience incredible pain. But I think a practical thing that we learn from their lives is that they didn't give up. They didn't give up. And it's in those moments where, if someone's listening today, you're struggling, you are in deep pain, you are maybe in an abusive relationship, whatever it is, God is with you. He proved it, as I said earlier, on the cross. Jesus came and suffered alongside us. He knows what suffering is like. We don't have a God who is aloof and disconnected from our suffering. So number one, he has suffered just like us. So he is acquainted with our grief. And number two, he will never leave you or forsake you. And I think the most practical thing you can do today is to turn to him. Turn your heart to him throughout the day. Be honest with God. Don't try to censor your prayers. Don't try to self-censor your thoughts with God. Be raw and be honest. And he will meet you in that honesty every time.
I love that. I'd love to get really personal with you just for a minute, as much as you can share. I feel like so many times as faith leaders, we can espouse a lot, teach a lot, pour in, but people are looking for us to sort of open our hearts
Yes.
and be vulnerable. So maybe we'll just start here. Who was Jack before this book? And who is Jack now after writing this book?
Well, the writing of this book itself was a bit of a, tempest or a test for me. As anyone who's kind of written a book before, it's like running a marathon. It's a big commitment. I think, I had to deal with a lot of self-doubt. I think, that there's always the imposter syndrome, and I think, for me, this was an amazing journey where God was saying, Jack, you do not have to be fill in the blank, right? Famous, amazing communicator. No, I've created you to be Jack Mooring, and I'm delighted for you to write a book because I want people to hear your perspective on who I am, hear your experiences. So I had to work through that, honestly. There were moments where I'm like, I can't do this. But every single time, whether it was relationships or just my relationship with God himself, encouraged me, no, I created you to be who you are. You don't have to compare yourself to other people. And I think anyone who listen to this, we need to hear what you have in your heart. We need to hear your story. We need to hear your gifts and your creativity. It can be a blessing to the world. You don't have to be like somebody else. So I had to really wrestle with that, honestly. And I'm so grateful for that process of this book because it really helped me be more grounded in who I am and just rest in that.
And I think stories are one of the most powerful tools we have to communicate the gospel, remind people of his nature, encourage hearts. It's just beautiful. Jesus was the master storyteller of all.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if because I'm sure you've been asked this so many times, but just for our Canadian viewers and listeners, what's the story of Jack transitioning from this world of like Leeland and music and tours, and I'm sure all of that can kind of just can get to your head.
Yeah.
Out of that into this sort of grounded, faith-filled pastor, there was got to be a story there.
Oh, absolutely. You're exactly right. Because, we were very blessed. We got to travel the world and it was just amazing, all the doors that God opened. And yeah, going from that to pastoring a small church in Tennessee that no one knew about, no one. I remember there were times in my office where I was just pacing back and forth, just spending time with God and going, God, like, I know the world's not seeing what's happening here. And to be honest, my flesh, you kind of don't like that sometimes. You're like, hey guys, look at me. Like, I'm over here doing things, and the Lord really had to burn that out of my heart and deal with that in me, and just going like, no. Quiet faithfulness is just as important in heaven. And so many times, we're so obsessed over platforms, and I just feel this so strong right now. If anyone's listening, do not define yourself by your platform, because it's worth it for the one. It's worth it for the one. And we're going to get to heaven and be blown away by the absolute heroes in heaven who didn't have a platform. So
yeah, I'm shaking my hands for those that are listening and not watching, because I just like something shifted for me in this conversation, and I'm not even on script now. I'm off book. I've got to ask you this question because I know it's burning in your heart, and it feels like a tension that you carry, a similar one to me. I'm going to say 2 words. Please just like regurgitate whatever comes up.
yes.
Celebrity Christians.
Yeah, well, that is a contradiction of terms. You know what I mean? It's like now I know there are some Christians who have been made celebrities. There's probably a small amount of them who that happened to them and they kind of couldn't help it. Their content went viral or whatever it was, and some of them have handled it well. What we're seeing right now is a lot of them who haven't handled it well, and really, and it also comes down to us, though, doesn't it? Because we love to make celebrities, we love to worship celebrities, and we will have our celebrities. We'll tear one down and we'll build another one up. And the reason I think we do that is because we want to be celebrities too. And if we can't be one, we'll want to have one to worship. And God's dealing with that right now. He is absolutely dealing with that right now. So I think all of us just going like, God, like, if you take my ministry and make it more well known, that's fine. That's up to the Lord. But I'm just going to be faithful, and I'm actually going to resist celebrity. I think there's some people listening to this right now. Your content or the things you make might start to go viral, might start to increase in its platform. But we need to honestly like work to even resist it to a certain degree. I think that would be healthy as believers. I think in this climate, we almost feel like it's wrong to say no to opportunities. It's wrong to say no to platform. And we need to go before the Lord and say, God, do you actually want my following to blow up? He might not for a while. So I think it's about a relationship with God. It's about doing what He's called us to do, and not conflating that with platform and numbers.
Oh my goodness, Jack, thank you for that. We needed to hear that. I needed to hear that encouraging word. And I think about platforms of old, people who have been change makers and history makers and names that we're still talking about, stories we're still reflecting on. And you've got a couple of really powerful historical accounts in your book to help us sort of like look back to look forward. I wonder if you could share just one sort of historical story that changed your life as you were writing the book. Right.
Well, a lot of these people, it's like they weren't seeking to be famous. They weren't seeking to be successful. And actually some of them were, and God dealt with that. It was before they had an encounter with the Lord. And then, once they were born again, they were just like, hey, I just want to be obedient to God. And then God touched what they did, and it expanded. But there's a lot of awesome stories in the book. I think one in particular is Kathryn Kuhlman. She was a healing evangelist in the 1960s. She has a very interesting story because she was very human. She made mistakes, and all the people I write about in the book, they made mistakes because they're human beings, right? And we can sort of deify these people, and we're not supposed to do that. We have to remember they're humans. And so, her story is amazing because she just said, God, she says, I want to see people come to Jesus. And, she had this amazing ministry where people were like miracles were happening. Like people were getting physically healed. And actually in that chapter, I deal with that topic because it's a difficult topic for some people. The streams of the church that I grew up in, that was just kind of like normal to talk about, but people have a lot of pain in regards to this issue of like, physical healing, faith healing, things like that. So we get into that in that chapter. But Kathryn's story is amazing. She just laid her life down to Jesus, and God changed so many lives through her yes. And she had to make tremendous sacrifices to give that yes to God. She was never married for like most of her adult life. And there's some things in her story that were really sad, that ended up happening later on in her ministry. But she ended up finally finishing well after having a moment of just kind of going astray for a little while. But she's human. But her yes to God was the most important thing I take away from that. And it literally changed millions of lives. Millions of people got saved and healed through her ministry. And all because of a little simple yes she gave as a little girl.
Wow. I can't wait to read this book. And I encourage people that are listening to really think about picking up not just one copy, but multiple copies. This feels like this could be a beautiful, like, focus group, small group, something that you've got to, like, you don't just read it. It's obviously like something you've got to read and like, how does it apply to me? What's God saying to you? And we kind of like work through that book together. We're talking about Portrait of God, Rediscovering the Attributes of God Through the Stories of His People with the one and only Jack Mooring, formerly from Leeland, now a dynamic pastor in Nashville. Beautiful story of transitioning. I want to ask you this question. I had the privilege of, we were talking about our shared quickly love of Priscilla Shirer, very grounded, powerful woman of God, solid and like rock solid in her ministry, so many years. And she talked about her struggle around just this one word. And I would love to hear from you because it's still fresh in my mind. Why is it so hard or difficult for us to live a fully surrendered life to God? What is that for you? Right. What have you found to be difficult around that area of surrender?
It's interesting. I was just talking to my dad about this.
No way.
This idea, and he's a pastor here. It's in the modern sort of Western culture, right? In all the amenities we have. I think the principalities and the spiritual warfare that we wrestle against, I think, in the modern culture, is spiritual sleepiness. It's a spiritual, we don't have real dramatic demons that we wrestle against, right, in the West, okay? But it's a really, really powerful one, and it's spiritual lethargy. And we have three enemies, right? Three enemies: the flesh, the world, and the devil. Okay.
Come on.
And all three of those enemies are basically working together to pull us away from God. And so, number one, if you're struggling with surrendering to God, hey, it's normal. You know what I mean? Because you got three enemies and they're working overtime to try to pull you away from the Lord. So that's the human struggle, right? So, and all of us are in it. So it's just daily saying, God, I am going to say no to my flesh. I'm going to say no to the world and a yes to you. But it's not this negative no thing. I'll actually talk about this in the chapter on holiness in the book. Every time we say no to the flesh, the world, or the devil, it's actually God is bringing us into a better yes. He has something better for us. He's not just trying to prohibit us from something bad. He's trying to give us something amazing. That's what holiness is. He's trying to give you this unbelievable life of joy and peace and love. So surrendering to God can sound negative, but it's the gateway to this incredible life of joy and peace. It's just that one quick decision that's painful of saying no to the flesh, but that leads to so much peace and life.
How do you envision this incredible book, Portrait of God, impacting the lives of like those that have been in the faith for such a long time and those that are so new to this walk in Jesus?
That's a great question, actually, because I wrote it with both of those groups in mind. Because if someone who's been a believer for a long time, they just need to be encouraged. They're probably just tired. They're a little discouraged about what's going on in the world. They need to remember the basics, get back to fundamentals, who God is. And I think these stories will encourage those people, especially the stories of the church history. But, a new believer or a non-believer, I really think this book can be very helpful for them. Because as I said earlier, the stories that I tell are very human stories, like people who struggled and they wrestled with their weaknesses, but they experienced this amazing God. And if you're a new believer or if you're not a believer, hey, this isn't some crazy mountaintop thing that only really spiritual people can experience. No. God is one word away, and you can just say help. That's one of my favorite prayers, and he'll be near to you and close to you. So I think these stories can encourage a new believer in that way, that God is accessible.
I love that you're so vulnerable and open, Jack. I love that about you. You seem to be an open book in the way you lead and teach in ministry, and I love that. You don't just give head knowledge. You're saying, this is where I was at. And I always have this phrase whenever I do a lot of itinerant speaking myself, and one of the things I say is that storms are our greatest teachers.
Yes.
Yay for the mountaintop. Yay, shiny valley, shiny glitzy mountain. But it's in the valley, I think, that we are, shaped and formed, our characters challenged, developed. It's where we grow. It's where we learn a lot of things. And I know that you've had some real deep struggles in your life that you've shared around mental health, around depression, some other things. Can I ask you it in this way? What have the rock bottom moments of your life taught you about God, the nature of God, which is what we're talking about, taught you about Jack,
right,
and taught you about other people?
Right. Yes. Well, I think in my wrestles with depression, there's times where it's been more acute and, more intense. There's been a few seasons in my life where there has been that rock bottom moment. And I think, for me, with depression, there can be a lot of guilt, especially if you grew up in church and are in ministry. Because whether it's taught to you directly or not, there's this implicit thing of no, you've got to stay strong. You've got to keep going. You got to push through. And, depression can it affects everything in your life. It can affect missed opportunities. And there's a lot of guilt that can come with that. And I really felt the Lord, there was a time where I felt I just needed to take a break. I was like, God, I need a Sabbath. I need a sabbatical. And I felt I was like, Lord, I don't deserve a sabbatical. You know what I mean? Because I feel like I should have hit more metrics in order to be able to deserve something like that. And I felt the Lord say to me, he said, Jack, it's not mercy if you deserve it. And mercy is only that's what mercy is. Mercy is undeserved. It's completely undeserved. And that's the gospel. And that's really what my struggles with depression and mental health have taught me with the Lord, is that he's with us. He is not cracking the whip and looking at our performance. He wants us. He wants a relationship with us. That's all he cares about. And in that relationship with us, he knows that once we know him, we'll go on to do great things. We'll go on to do good works for him. He's much less concerned about that. He wants us to sit with him. And so I really dealt with that sort of works kind of legalism that was in my heart. I didn't realize was there so much.
And what did you find out about community?
That's huge. I heard someone say this recently. They were talking about addiction, and oftentimes with addiction, people think that the opposite of addiction is sobriety. But they said the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's community. Because the way to freedom, the way to peace, the way to healing is community, it's relationships, it's intimacy, actually. It's being vulnerable. And when that vulnerability and that intimacy happens in community, then the freedom happens, right? Then the sobriety will happen, or the transformation you want to see will happen. But the most important thing is the community. Another way I heard it put is that, oftentimes all the baggage we carry and the unhealthy habits or things that we don't like about ourselves, a lot of that came from trauma. And trauma comes in community. Trauma came from relationships. So the only way that trauma can be healed is in relationships.
Wow.
The pain that's pushing you to act out in unhealthy ways, that came from relationships. So the only way it can be healed is in a godly relationship. So it's vulnerability. It's being honest. That is the key to freedom and in healing.
This conversation is like fresh, cool water for me right now. It is absolutely where I'm at. And I really needed to be reminded of God's goodness, but also the power of community. Some of us, when we go through storms, we tend to go
Yes.
into ourselves and put I call it the fortress, build the walls up. There's the moat and the drag. Like, good luck getting to
Yes.
Cheryl. I'm Enneagram 8. So I'm just like, shoo,
Yeah.
right. I got it.
Right.
Superhero complex. So this is so good. I got one last question for you, if I may, if you've got the
Yes.
time. I could stay with you and talk with you forever. I'm being legit. My whole schedule's changed. I'm like, oh, I can do that later. I'm just talking to Jack. I feel like there's no one better served for this question than you. That this year that I've talked to, literally this year that I've taught, and it's from chosen all the way down to, to authors, and you've served God's people on the stage from a musical sort of like worship standpoint, to this sort of place of, like you said, this sort of like shedding of fame and celebridom and notoriety, and just like the desert moment of just like you and God, and do you see me, and struggling in that, and then becoming this faith-filled pastor. So I feel like you've seen both sides. So here's a question. What are we getting right, doing right in church that's working, and like you're thinking like, yes, more of this? And what are we getting terribly wrong? What's causing damage? What's causing mass exodus? Like, can you
Right.
speak to that?
Well, I'll answer the first one first. I think what we're doing wrong, we've done wrong, is anytime we put the institution above the people. When we try to protect the movement, we try to protect the organization instead of the people. John Maxwell, who is amazing. I don't think people realize how amazing he really is personally. He's like a soul winner. He's awesome. But he always talks about this. It's like the high road leader puts people first. People first. That's what a real leader does. And I think we've had a leadership crisis in the church because they at our worst moments, we've put ourselves first as leaders. We put the organization first. So that's what I believe the Lord is correcting. And thank God there's so many godly leaders that we don't know about, right? That are putting people first. And so I think, at our worst moments, that's what we're doing wrong. But I think what we're doing right now is, I actually see a lot of humility in the church right now, because we understand that, we've taken the reins into our own hands a lot of times. And I was just at a huge church growth conference, which was actually really amazing. But the leader, he got up and said, he started talking about, they pastors this massive church. And he was talking about all the changes that they're making. And it was just such humility, because everyone was coming there to ask him for tips on how to grow their church. And he's going, hey, these are all the things that we're not doing right, and we're changing.
Wow.
And it was just really powerful. So I think anytime that we're operating humility, we're winning. And serving, we need to be on the side of the powerless. We need to be on the side of the hurting. And that's when we're at our best as a church.
Wow. Oh my goodness, Jack. Thank you so much. That was so honest of you. I appreciate you. Well, we're coming down to the end, and I get the privilege of asking you a question I've asked every single guest for 5 seasons. I don't know how many questions and guests I've asked this to, but what I love is that the answer is always different. It's always beautiful. So in light of our conversation, kind of all the things we've been talking about as a backdrop, finish this sentence. Jack, it's time for what? It's time for what?
It's time for God's people to arise and live like Jesus. I think, the world is so hungry for Jesus people, for people who sound like him, who carry the atmosphere and the love of Jesus. They're so hungry for it. Like it is, we don't have a harvest problem. We have a laborer problem. The harvest is ripe. It's out there. People are hungry for God. I think they're just hungry for people who look like Jesus.
I love this. Ooh, I'm going to flip it on you. I'm going to flip it on you.
Yes, ma'am.
What is it not time for?
It's not time. It is not the time for us to choose fighting short-term wins over eternal perspective, because we are choosing short-term, whether it's political gains or organizational. We're choosing short-term wins for eternal perspective and value. And listen, we got to get our witness back. People are dying and going to hell, and we can't let them die and go to hell because we're trying to get a short-term win. And we got to remember people's souls. And it's time to lay that nonsense down. It's time. And I'm preaching to myself.
I'm just going to call the ushers to come at this time, and we're going to collect the offering. And if I can get the choir to come and sing "Nearer, My God, to Thee" in the key of E. In the key of E.
Yes,
it's got to be the key of E.
Yes, ma'am. The key of E.
Jack Mooring, you are a gift to the kingdom of God. Man, I'm as many would say, gosh, we loved Leeland, but man, do I love this 2.0.
Oh, thank you.
This new iteration of Jack. Gosh, we need your voice in the kingdom of God. It is so honest and authentic and integral.
Awesome. Thank you, Cheryl. You are amazing. You've been a blessing to me. This was so fun.
Oh, Jack, it's been incredible speaking with you. Please let us know. How can we keep in touch with you, follow you, and all the things?
Yes. On all socials, I'm just at Jack Mooring. You can find me there. I'm really active on Instagram and Twitter. But yeah, I post a lot. I write quite a bit and just post my thoughts online quite a bit, and just try it really in the vein of this book, trying to encourage people about who God is and his nature. So you can find me on my socials.
I love it. Okay, well, 30-second speed round. Strap in.
Yeah.
Here we go. Coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee.
Breakfast or dinner?
Breakfast.
NLT or NIV?
Ooh, that was hard. NLT.
Nike or Adidas?
Nike.
Football or basketball?
Football.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. Awesome. You've been great, Jack. Thank you so much for being on the path.
Cheryl, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to On the Path podcast with Cheryl Nembhard. Please like, download, and subscribe. This has been an Exousia Media production.